Howdy, and welcome to Brandi's Book Stack. Today we'll be doing my July reading wrap-up, and sadly it was only 3 books, but at least they were pretty good books. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the stacks. The first novel that I read in the month of July was Evelyn Waugh's Brideshead Revisited. And this is a really interesting and different novel. I originally picked this off the shelf because I thought I was grabbing something by E.M. Forster, didn't really realize it, and then the next thing I know I was reading Evelyn Waugh. I was looking for Forster because I knew that he was a homosexual and I was wanting to do something for Pride Month. And but then I looked into Evelyn Waugh's background, and it turns he had relationship with both men and women. So I still think it's appropriate for Pride Month. The plot of this story also, really, in my opinion, starts with a homosexual romance. Now, a lot of people disagree with this and don't interpret it this way, but the two main characters, Charles and Sebastian. Sebastian is the young, posh, cool, rich kid. And then Charles is kind of the little bit stuffy acquaintance. And Charles, in my opinion, falls in love with Sebastian. And you could try to argue that this was just a really close friendship, I suppose, but I don't buy it. All the language that's used to describe the relationship is the kind of language you would use for a romantic relationship. Additionally, Evelyn Waugh had a lover when he was at Oxford, who the character of Sebastian is very much based upon, so much so that in the manuscript, he actually wrote his lover's name instead of the character Sebastian's by accident and had to cross it out and write in Sebastian. So I think that is a little telling as well. So the first third, I would say, of the book really covers this relationship between those two characters. And then kind of the second third turns into more of a discussion on addiction, because as Sebastian struggles with alcoholism. And then the last third, and I think really the predominant theme throughout this novel, is sort of how we handle existential crisis, particularly in regard to religious faith. Sort of how do we as humans handle it when society no longer embraces the tenets of our religious faith. And particularly this is addressed with regard to the Catholic faith. So for example, there is a female character in this novel who decides to get married. And when she decides to get married, she ends up discovering late into the marriage that her fiance, late in the engagement, that her fiance actually had been married before. Now, if you were a Protestant at the time, no problem. You just got married. No big deal. However, because he had been divorced and being Catholic at the time, it was very much against her religious faith. And she had to sort of abandon her religious ideals in order to marry this man she thought she loved. And that becomes kind of a theme throughout the novel. How do we address that disconnect? You know, society at the time had moved on, no longer considered divorce a big deal. However, in the Catholic faith, divorce was very much a big deal. So how do you resolve that disconnect? And especially, how do you resolve that disconnect when those religious beliefs aren't bringing you any personal happiness? And is it worth the sacrifice to go ahead and stick to your religious convictions even when they're not bringing you any personal fulfillment on this earth? It was a really interesting discussion. I do think the book was a little disjointed because, you know, like I said, we have this beginning sort of homosexual romance between these two men, and then we kind of go into this addiction, and then it ends on this religious tone, which is not really what you expect when you start the novel. And I do really love it when a novel does something unexpected. And I think discussion of those religious disconnects between our convictions and where society really is at the time. I think a lot of people I know are really struggling with this whole concept of homosexuality. You know, as a Christian, they believe homosexuality is wrong, but then they know often somebody who's a homosexual and want to be kind to that person, want to be accepting of that person, and how do they reconcile it? And it's which one wins. And I suppose it really depends on your perspective. You know, do you change your religious beliefs, or do you continue with your religious beliefs even when maybe there's that societal disconnect? I think it's really interesting novel, and I don't want to say any more than really I've said because it would spoil it. But like I said, it's a little disjointed because it is those 3 sections, and I really wish the homosexual romance would have actually been explored more than it was. Because I felt like it was just kind of dropped, maybe because, I don't know why. Maybe because in Evelyn Waugh's own life, his male lover sort of dropped him. I don't know. It's an interesting book. I wouldn't give it a 5-star for me, but I'd say it's a good solid 4-star. I enjoyed it pretty thoroughly. So recommend, check out Brideshead Revisited. It's worth a read. So the next book I read, pretty different, and that is The Decagon House Murders. And this is by Yukito Ayatsuji. And I probably said that name wrong, so I apologize. There's a Japanese school of writers that sought to emulate Agatha Christie. And in this novel, we have a group of college-age students that are in a society that it's like a detective fiction club. And they all have nicknames of famous authors. You know, one of them's called Agatha. One of them's called Ellery, for Ellery Queen. One of them called Sherlock, for Sherlock Holmes, and so on and so forth. And one of them has an uncle who has an ability to rent this sort of mysterious house. The uncle owns the house, and he's going to let them rent it. And at this house, it's called the Decagon House, as the name implies. Everything's in a decagon in this particular house. And there were some sort of mysterious happenings. There were some murders that happened in this house that were never really solved to any satisfactory measure. There was a man who disappeared, and then a couple of dead bodies, but how do you know who the murderer is? Did one kill the other? What happened? And so you have that kind of going on, and then at the same time, because they all go to this island, and again, it's kind of that closed room mystery, very much like it's modeled on and Then There Were None. Sorry, and when they go to the island, there's no way off. That there's no communication with the outside world. There's nobody that they can hail to come and get them before the week is over. And of course, they start dying one by one by one. And it's about how they figure that out. And then we also have a member of the club, a former member of a club, one who decided to leave it, who is also researching what's going on here. He gets a mysterious letter in the mail, and it starts making him look into it. And you follow both of these plots, the plot that's going on inside the house, and then the plot with the young man that's outside the house and how he's trying to solve the mystery. It's good. It had a pretty good reveal. And I thought it was just a pretty good mystery. However, I will say the dialogue is really stilted and artificial seeming. these kids don't talk the way kids talk. And I don't know if that's a problem with the translation or if that's a problem with the actual writing itself. But I did find it kind of hard to get into. But once I got into it, the pace picked up considerably, and I really enjoyed the book. So again, I would say this is about a 4 for me. Enjoyable, but just not top of the mark. So I'd recommend you check it out. I checked this out from the library, and it was well worth that. So the third novel I read in the month of July was Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. Have this lovely little copy I got for $4, which is like highway robbery on my part. And I normally really enjoy Jane Austen's novels. I've read Pride and Prejudice, Persuasion, and Sense and Sensibility. This is one of the few novels she wrote that I hadn't read. And here again, we sort of have a novel in several parts. I was surprised to discover they don't show up at Northanger Abbey until like the middle of the book. The first third is spent in Bath, and we follow a young lady named Catherine who lives in a small town with her siblings, and there really isn't much in the way of eligible males in her immediate vicinity. And so she has some neighbors that are going to Bath to, take the waters. And when they go there, they invite her to come along so she can go to balls and potentially meet eligible men that might be suitable for her to marry. So she goes to Bath, extremely excited, and the character of Catherine is extremely naive, this young, completely innocent young woman. She's about 17, I think, at the time this takes place. And of course she does meet a man. And about the third is sort of the difficulties in that romance. Never gets really resolved in the first third of the book. The second third of the book, she spends at Northanger Abbey. A friend, her would-be fella's friend invites her to Northanger Abbey because she is lonely. And then there's about a third of the book where all we really cover is Catherine's imagination just running away with her completely. She's seeing a ghost behind every corner. And so there's a lot of that in the next third. And then in the final third, it's sort of about how she resolves difficulties between her and her fella getting together. So I really loved the section that was in Bath. I wish that Jane Austen had just kept it there. Because I felt like I never felt like there was enough development in the relationship between her and her fella. I'll just call him her fella so you won't be spoiled. I didn't feel like there was enough development in that relationship. It was sort of, I saw you across a crowded room, I thought you were cute, and after that I was just enamored of you. And, I'd like to see more for, this undying love kind of attraction. So, she went ahead, and in the part where we go to Northanger Abbey, I just really felt like that got a bit tedious. I got tired of hearing about, and then I thought this happened. I thought, there was this, this goes behind this door, and look, it was just my imagination running away with me. And then, look, I did the same thing again. And then, look, I did the same thing again. So that got a little tedious. And then I really felt like the last third that Jane Austen was just really reaching for some reason to find out why Catherine and her fella couldn't be together. I felt like she was just really clutching at what can I do that'll make it her not be able to do it. And I thought it was kind of goofball. And then I felt like the resolution of it was also a bit goofball. I will say, part of this is maybe, my modern prejudices, because certainly in Austen's time, it wasn't like there was dating like we would have today. in Austen's time, you might only, see someone across a crowded room and think they're kind of cute, and then the next thing you know, you'd be married to them, because you didn't have a lot of opportunity for conversation and getting to know someone like we would have today. And in some ways, I think she's kind of showing the difficulties that causes. Other than that, I thought Catherine as a character was kind of milquetoast. I mean, she's just the fainting heroine, right? She's perfect. Everything she does is perfect. She never has a bad thought about anybody else. She's so naive. She doesn't even notice when somebody's into her, And I just didn't love that. I wish she'd have been a bit more flawed, because it would have made her a more interesting character. All that said, it was still a pretty enjoyable read. I mean, Jane Austen is a great writer. Like, the actual writing itself is good and makes you just fall into the book. So I'd still give this about a 4-star, but it doesn't go to a 5 for me either. So, we have three 4-star reads this month, and just not quite making it to the top of the list. So what have you been reading in the month of July? Have you picked up anything good? Anything old but good? Put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that bell. As always, thanks for watching. Bye.